Hello students, today we're going to talk about phenomenology, post-structuralism and deconstructionism and try to understand these concepts. Let's talk about phenomenology. Phenomenology, the word phenomena, it derives from the word phenomena, and which means it appears to be. So how those things or objects appear in our experience, the phenomenology is all about that. The history leading to phenomenology has come through René Descartes, the rationalist thinker, who said cogito ergo sum, which means I think therefore I am, Locke's conception of the mind, and Hume's empiricism. You do not need to know all these things in detail. I'm just giving you an overview of phenomenology, a kind of basic understanding of this term. So previously we discussed reader response theory. So we see some sort of many things in common with reader response theory. Phenomenology and reader response theory somewhat inform each other. So psychological reader response theory to some extent cohere with phenomenology. As we define phenomenology further, phenomenology is the study of structures of consciousness as experienced from the first person point of view. When you read a text or when you look at the object, how you view, how you perceive, how you think is what all about phenomenology. And it also related to other disciplines such as ontology, epistemology, logic, and ethics. So ontology has something to do with the being, the object's being, the existence of the object or of the thing. Epistemology has something to do with the knowledge, and the logic and ethics. So it is basically the 20th century movement, and we find this the phenomenology in the works of Husserl, Heidegger, Sartre, and Merleau-Ponty. So as we talk about more on phenomenology, it's a disciplinary field in philosophy and also the moment in the history of philosophy. As I already said, it is a conscious experience from the subjective or first person point of view. So in that sense, how you perceive might be different from how the other person perceives. Reader response theory has something to do with giving existence or giving life to the text. Phenomenology is more about how you experience something from your personal subjective point of view. And Husserl talks about phenomenology of intentionality, which has something to do with your experience is directed toward or represents or intents things only through particular concept, thoughts, ideas, and images. It is a conscious experience, but the consciousness is shaped by experience. The difference between how we perceive versus what the objects are in themselves. So here's the thing. When you look at something or when you read a text, how you understand the text, how you perceive the text or the thing or the object is depend upon your experience. Your experience is also shaped by your upbringing, your socio-cultural political milieu. That might shape your experience, and then your experience shape your consciousness, how you perceive, what you think. So these are two different things. One, how you perceive versus what the objects are in themselves. The objects in themselves might be perceived differently as they are different person to perceive it. So phenomenology is more about how you perceive something. So there is a traditional phenomenology which focuses on subjective, practical, and social conditions of experience. It is pure description of lived experience, and people tend to use the word I see, I think, I desire. And these are some of the root words of phenomenology. Has something to do with the gnosis and noema. So both come from the word noio, which means perceive or think. So noesis is the intentional process of consciousness, and noema is the ideal content, the object. So it's a consciousness of the object. when we look at the object or when we read the text, it's all about how we take that something through the consciousness, through our personal consciousness. That is all about phenomenology. So for example, Gautam Buddha, who is also considered as the light of Asia, who practiced phenomenology to achieve enlightenment, who went through the phenomenological process, in his meditation, and he perceived the world, how the world can be a painless world. And there are different types of phenomenology. I'm not going to talk about these different types of phenomenology in detail, which is in your readings that I have posted to Georgia View. But there are different types of phenomenology. So I try to make some sort of connection between phenomenology and public relations writing. That is also one of the course that you are in this semester. So when we talk about phenomenology, we said it's more about the perceptions and the consciousness of the object, or how we experience the object, versus PR writing, which has something to do more to do with facts and factual ideas. So that is what we see. But what's the benefit? What are the benefits of knowing this theory, phenomenological theory, as a public relations writer? Is public relations writing requires an understanding of others. Others means here audiences, and how the audiences might perceive or interpret or view or expect or desire the content you compose as a public relations writer, or the text or the message you compose as a public relations writer. If you have your audiences in mind, and if you design the message thinking of the audience in your mind, perhaps you will be able to write in a way that will be more communicative and reach out to the audiences out there. So this idea of phenomenology also help you be very cognizant of the audiences, of the readers out there, in terms of their consciousness as well. You will not be writing just based on your own thinking or your own consciousness or your own understanding, but also you'll be thinking on behalf of the reader or the audience's understanding, and making your piece of text or message as a PR writer more communicative. So again, it's all about knowing the audiences, the publics, the stakeholders, and thinking from their perspective, thinking from their point of view. So phenomenology is more about how you view the world, how you view the text from your personal subjective point of view. Now, when you have this idea as a public relations writer, you also will be thinking how from the perspective of the audience as well. So how they might perceive your message. So you'll try to think from their perspective, and that way you might end up composing a message as a public relations writer even more meaningful, or you might be able to make it more persuasive and more communicative. So let's talk about the post-structuralism and deconstructionism a little bit. Post-structuralism is questions. The center has been called into question, because structuralism, we discussed structuralism previously, which more talks about the structures. Each and everything has its structure. Language does have its structure. The history, or everything is in kind of a structure. But the idea of post-structuralism, call this idea of structuralism into question. Previously, God was in the center, and then men, women, the human being became the center, and now we have the robot. You see that one after another thing is being replaced, and this is also the idea, because I brought that deconstructionism into play, is because post-structuralism is also the idea that goes along with the deconstructionism. So that's why I kind of try to discuss both terms simultaneously here. So under deconstructionism or post-structuralism, absence becomes the mode of presence, because something that is not discussed is always present there, because we understand things in the presence of something which is not there. Let me make it even much clearer. For example, we make meaning in relationship of something that is not present, because there is a hierarchical relationship of language. Hierarchical means one has a kind of superior status, the other word does have a kind of inferior status. When we say light and dark, light is supposed to have a superior status, and the dark does, is supposed to have a lower status. But we understand light in relation to dark. Okay, light is light because it's not dark. That's how we understand. When we talk about light, there is an absence of darkness. When we talk about light, the word light, there's the absence of the word dark. But we understand, but when we talk about light, but the darkness is also come into play, because you understand light in the relation of the word dark. That's why there is the presence of the word dark also, although there is absence of the word dark. I don't know whether you understand this or not. Because when we say light, and there is no word dark as such, but we understand the meaning of light in relation to the word dark, because the dark is absent there, we suppose, but still it is present, because of its presence in the back, we understand the meaning of the word light. So that is the relationship of language. So again, it does have the relationship. So, for example, money is nothing as a piece of paper, but it has economic relationship, so it is valuable. So this idea of deconstructionism or post-structuralism has something to do with how meaning is constructed in many ways. There is nothing a center as such, because many discourses come into play. For example, sometimes the power creates meaning. So reality, there is no fixed reality or the truth, but there are multiple truths. So multiple truths are made out of multiple truths are created based on who exercises the power. Reality is dependent upon the constructed discourse in our society. Who construct the discourse? Who is in power? That creates the truth. And the idea of post-structuralism and deconstructionism is there is not only one truth or only one the fixed meaning, but there are multiple truths, and power can be shifted. That is Michel Foucault's idea, and meaning are shifted too. Look at, again I said, the king was in power previously, the god, king, and now you see the human being, and now the robot. And again, what is truth or what is false are in ultra-moral sense. That is what Friedrich Nietzsche says. And then the idea of hegemony also is discussed under post-structuralism and deconstructionism, and agency is written to the subject. And it's all about the meaning productions. Who is in power will create meanings. And deconstructionism is the idea propounded by Derrida and Ronald Barthes. Ronald Barthes' concept of the death of the author is very famous. He says that when the author writes a text, then the author is dead. The meaning of the text is produced, by the reader. Reader gives meaning to the text, and and if you have a different readers, the meaning will be different based on their own discourse into play or their own experience or the perception of the world. So I try to kind of make some sort of connection between the PR writing and theories. When you write as a public relation writer, you always will be thinking of right word. Again, as I said, how meaning is made is the idea behind the structuralism and post-structuralism theory. So you need to be very cognizant of the right word, the diction, the choice of words, and what makes it more meaningful. Because the choice of word that you have in your writing might communicate differently when it reaches out to the audience out there, and those audience might be coming from different socio-cultural economic backgrounds, so you'll be very much cautious about using these words. Again, you will have audiences across cultures in mind, because those audiences who come see your piece of text that you write as a public relations writer might reach out to many audiences across different cultures. And people coming from different cultures might have different way of perceiving the text. So you need to be aware of that as well as a public relations writer. And then subjective versus subjective, is the idea that you try to be more persuasive, try to be more objective and factual when you write a piece of text or compose a message or write a research paper as a public relations writer.